Welcome everyone to this last in a series on Mahalakshmi and the beginning of an introduction to Mahasaraswati. And I am Radhe. I'm with my colleague here, Vladimir Yatsenko, at the Sri Aurobindo Center in Fountain Inn, and we are being joined by H.P. Rama. We welcome you, H.P. So nice that you're able to join us today. And Vladimir will be beginning this session, speaking, I think, primarily on Mahalakshmi. And then towards the end, I'd like to do a bit of an overview of the symbol and several important syntheses that it represents based on Sri Aurobindo's personal yogic sadhana. So without further ado, Vladimir, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And you are muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Radha. Thank you, HP, for being here. And it tells me that our internet connection is unstable here, so in case I'm frozen, you let me know. So, Mahalakshmi, this is the big topic, and I believe it is the biggest. So I prepared some notes for myself to address this issue in the light of the creation. So if you look at the purpose and the meaning of creation, what it was for, how it started, and the raison d'être of the whole creation was that he who possesses himself fully in his consciousness, power, and bliss has full identity, or as Mother says, possesses himself in his full identity and has identity of Ananda. So Ananda is possessed by his full identity. He wanted to experience himself in unity. And that unity, how would that be? How could you create unity within oneself who is one? This is the biggest challenge. And so it was done through divine Ananda, through the bliss. The bliss is the state of consciousness and power when he possesses himself fully in his awareness and his power. He has bliss. Bliss emanates from this self-possession. And that bliss became the foundation for the creation. So it was the purpose, as Mother says. He wanted to experience himself in unity and get additional Ananda, as Mother says, through unity, not through self-identity. Self-identity is one Ananda, Ananda of conscious being and Ananda of conscious force. But Ananda of exchange, of interchange between different elements of oneself, between different selves, requires multitude. So this multitude was the purpose or the means by which he could arrive at this additional Ananda of unity. And that is represented by Mahalakshmi. And as you know, Bhaga is the godhead of the bliss in the Veda, and Bhaga is from root bhaj, to share. The divine delight is always shared between different selves. So it is never enough to have only the Ananda of conscious existence, which is also Ananda of self-identity, but Ananda of unity is always an additional joy, which is, as Mother says, the aim of this creation. So to generate that additional joy in relation with different selves was the purpose of the creation. Now, that was the reason of creation. But the aim of created beings, of creatures here, is also to arrive to this bliss, because that bliss is the foundation of harmony between the being and consciousness, between consciousness and force. So consciousness and power in full harmony are expressed by Mahalakshmi. So whenever we achieve some bliss, that means we found some harmonious state of ourselves. So I want to highlight first what Sri Aurobindo says on the Mahalakshmi, his major points. First of all, he speaks about the power and eternal beauty and Ananda. He says that she represents an unseizable secret of divine harmonies, unseizable secret of divine harmonies, and the compelling magic and an irresistible universal charm. So if you can imagine the universal, irresistible universal charm, that delight to be alive, that life force which Lakshmi represents in every movement of our being here, being alive, it is that irresistible universal charm of adventure, of growth of consciousness. So the delight is found through different means and is acquired by different means, by the means of knowledge, by the means of power, leadership, by the means of exchange of goods and services, by service. It is all pointed towards one purpose, to achieve the delight. We look for knowledge only because through knowledge we arrive at the delight. We look for power because through power we acquire that delight of Mahalakshmi. So, and also perfection. Perfection is needed only for one reason, to arrive at the delight of Mahalakshmi. So Sri Aurobindo speaks in the Secret of the Veda in his book, truth is the passage and the antechamber, the bliss of the divine existence is the goal. Or else truth is the foundation, bliss the supreme result. So if the bliss is the supreme result, so all the other Mahashaktis around this bliss are playing this role. The force gives the power and intensity to this bliss. The vastness and purity of Maheshwari gives the foundation of the truth to this bliss. Yes, and perfection of Mahasaraswati gives all the elements in their relations to generate this Ananda of unity. And this was for me actually a big discovery over years, that Mahalakshmi is the purpose. And that's why it is so difficult to achieve her presence, because she is very difficult to manifest. Yes. So I would like to cover all the elements of what Sri Aurobindo gives, and then to conclude. So first of all, this is the power of eternal beauty and Ananda. So Mahalakshmi is not just Ananda, not just the harmony. This is the power of eternal beauty. There is a strength in it. And bliss is also charged with power of Mahakali. And the second point is incarnation of love. He speaks about her. Mahalakshmi represents the perfection of manifested love. To be close to her is a profound happiness, says Sri Aurobindo, and to feel her within the heart is to make existence a rapture and a marvel. Through her grace, tenderness, and smile, she captivates the soul and plunges it into unfathomable bliss. So you can imagine what Mahalakshmi's role is to bring us to this purpose of creation, to generate the Ananda of unity. The third point Sri Aurobindo points out is the conditions of her presence, which are very difficult. Mahalakshmi requires specific conditions. She demands harmony and beauty of the mind and the soul, Harmony and beauty of the thoughts and feelings, says Sri Aurobindo. Harmony and beauty in every outward act and movement. She repels anything that is selfish or vulgar and avoids environments where love is mixed with selfish motives. It's quite unthinkable how difficult it is to achieve such a state. Yes? And of course, we need Maheshwari with purity and vastness for this. We need Mahakali with strength and dedication to only the divine to achieve this harmony and perfection in every action and service of Mahasaraswati. And the fourth point which I wanted to highlight is that her relation to wealth and what is wealth and money. Commonly, it is known that she is the goddess of wealth, and financial accumulation is not the only part of her wealth. The mother explained that one can be financially poor but deeply rich from Mahalakshmi's standpoint. If one possesses a generous nature, and not only generous but harmonious nature, yes, can be poor and very rich from the standpoint of Mahalakshmi. So when his nature is that to give and to support generosity, yes, to support the whole creation around with whatever is available to the person, that true wealth belongs to the divine. The understanding that all the wealth belongs to the divine and has to be distributed, because this distribution of wealth is nothing but the sacrifice, supporting all by all means. There is, of course, another source of the wealth, which is mentioned also in the Veda. In the Rig Veda, there is a hymn to Sri Suktam. I will briefly mention this hymn. And there, Lakshmi has her kind of twin sister, Alakshmi. There are two sources of wealth. Lakshmi is that harmony with the divine and supporting all in their growth and prosperity. And Alakshmi is the selfish possession and acquirement of wealth. So these two ways of possessing wealth. As I mentioned, bhaga is the divine enjoyment or delight or bliss, which is coming from Udbhaj, to share. When the sharing is not taking place, then there is this selfish accumulation of wealth. And this selfish accumulation of wealth is portrayed as the vala, the subconscious cave of our unregenerated senses of action, panis. Panis are those who are withholding the wealth for themselves. They are robbers and traffickers. They accumulate the divine wealth for themselves and create selfishness in us. Our karmendriyas, or our senses of action, are actually grown up from the inconscient. And because of that, our attitude towards wealth is a little bit stingy. We want to acquire and to hold on to wealth. And that generates that what the Veda calls alakshmi, that which does not create harmony and harmonious growth in the world. And we know about this. In the Puranas, they speak about Kubera. Kubera is the one who possesses the riches, underground riches. Interesting gnomes we have from Western tradition. They are always underground, having diamonds and rubies and so on. And they are hiding it from the light, from the surface light where the human beings live. They are always underground. So the wealth is stored underground and kept for selfish purposes. So there are two sources of wealth: selfish arrangement of wealth and sacrificial or celestial, Lakshmi's wealth. And there is a big difference between the two, as you see. Mother speaks about these two movements of giving and receiving, and both they give joy, but she says giving, generosity, generates much greater joy. And here we can see why, yes, because it supports all by the means of all. So these were the major points which I wanted to highlight. And because they were not mentioned before. I remember a beautiful presentation of Alok when he spoke about the delight of Lakshmi. And I was thinking, yes, but there is also this force and need of destroying any harmony which is not perfect. What is not perfect harmony? If we think of it for a second, it is that which is compromised, which is charged with selfishness and gaps in between, which is and that has to be destroyed. And that's why we need to introduce Kali's force or introduce the knowledge force of Maheshwari, because Lakshmi, or the harmony of today in this imperfect manifestation, is not really true harmony or the divine harmony. And Sri Aurobindo speaks about this in the Life Divine in a very interesting way. For all problems of existence are essentially problems of harmony. They arise from the perception of an unsolved discord and the instinct of an undiscovered agreement or unity. So there is a unity which is not undiscovered and has to be discovered. And because of that, there is disharmony. Disharmony is of that undiscovered unity. To rest content with an unsolved discord is possible for the practical and more animal part of man, is possible, and that's what we do. But impossible for his fully awakened mind, and usually even his practical parts only escape from the general necessity either by shutting out the problem or by accepting a rough, utilitarian, and unillumined compromise. Perfect description of our state. That's why Mahalakshmi cannot be fully manifested here. Because these are the compromises with our selfish nature, with those other forms of wealth we want to acquire. For essentially, says Sri Aurobindo, all nature seeks a harmony, life and matter in their own sphere, as much as mind in the arrangement of its perceptions. So the harmony of Mahalakshmi has to be established in our mind, in our vital and our bodies. And that is the fulfillment we are all seeking for. All our life, if you look at it closely, you will see that we are constantly in search of this delight of existence. And the delight is hidden behind all the objects. That's why we are looking for objects, for fulfillment, for realizations, for building new, for growing in consciousness. Why? Because there is a hidden delight which is drawing us to it, which wants to manifest the divine. It is through delight that the divine will be fully manifested. It is his purpose. It is for that purpose he made this creation possible. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, we hear this when Bhrigu discovers one by one all the levels of existence, starting from the material Annam Brahmeti, then Prano Brahmeti, then Prana, vital world, Mano Brahmeti Vyajanat. Then he discovers that supermind is Brahman, spirit. And finally, Anando Brahmeti Vyajanat. He discovers that Ananda, the bliss, is Brahman. Ananda Dheva Kalvemani Bhutani Jayante, because from Ananda all these beings are being born. Anandena Jatani Jivanti. By Ananda they live. Anandam Prayanti Abhisam Vishanti. And to Ananda they go. Ananda is the source, the means, and the aim. And that is Mahalakshmi. Mahalakshmi is the aim and the reason, the cause of this manifestation. Maybe here I will stop, and this was my uniformal message to say that who is Mahalakshmi, yeah? And why it is so difficult to achieve the state of Mahalakshmi, to realize it. We see it in our life, how many difficulties, how many contradictions, how many selfish motives are blocking the very happiness of that presence of the divine delight. And how much struggle we have to go through in order to have a glimpse of that harmony. So here I will stop and I will invite Radha to continue the journey. Yeah?
Thank you, Vladimir. Thank you so very much. And I think just as Vladimir, you can't speak about one Mahashakti, whether it's Lakshmi or Mahasaraswati, without also honoring and acknowledging the necessity of the other three. And the same is with me as I was starting to think about Maha Saraswati, which was originally what I was going to address as a transition. It kind of evolved into more of a recognition of all four and really seeing the important role that they all play in the world. And out of that kind of came an understanding or a realization that behind or supporting or embedded within the mother symbol is really several lesser known dimensions. And so I wanted to share today some of my findings as I was preparing for this talk today, and again, how the mother symbol kind of incorporates several syntheses that are drawn directly from Sri Aurobindo's personal yogic experiences. And so I'll be mentioning all four, including Mahalakshmi and Mahasaraswati. So in the synthesis of yoga, we see and we all recognize that Sri Aurobindo's rare ability to really take seemingly irreconcilable spiritual paths or even contradictory philosophical systems, and by uncovering through his own experiences the truth within each, that he's able to synthesize them into an even greater truth. And so we see, of course, that he has done this with what he refers to as the aesthetic refusal and the materialistic denial, right? He effectively are bringing together the split between the spiritual East and the materialist West. And we see the same harmonization and synthesization as he approached Vedanta in Tantra, or Sankhya and Vedanta, or even nature's evolutionary process as expanded by Darwinism and the soul's evolution, and so on. So this was just an amazing capacity he had as someone that was able to ascend into the higher realms, the higher reaches of the mind. And when it comes to the mother symbol, what we discover is that it embodies three additional syntheses based on his yogic realizations. And these three I wanted to kind of walk through today. The first will be the synthesis of the four Mahashaktis into a unified metrics. The second is the integration of the four Purushas with these four Mahashaktis. And the third is the bridging of the orthodox caste system, which we know institutionalized hereditary social structures, with the four intrinsic soul powers, or swabhavas. And ultimately, these three syntheses provided the necessary background for Sri Aurobindo and the mother to accomplish what, as dual avatars, they came to do, which was to really confront the supreme resistance of matter and to help humanity transition into a new yuga, the Satya Yuga. So the first synthesis is with the four Mahashaktis, Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. We find their individual names originate within ancient Shakta and Puranic traditions that span back many centuries within the Indian scriptures. But we really don't see their synthesis into a unified supreme foursome and their psychological mapping onto the universal planes of our inner being until later through Sri Aurobindo's unique spiritual synthesis. In classical Hinduism, we find the names of the Mahashaktis scattered throughout various texts and various tantric agamas, yet they were never really grouped as a foursome. And instead, they existed in two completely separate traditional spiritual lineages. On the one hand, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati, they formed the foundation of the Devi Mahatmyam, also known as the Chandi. And according to its philosophical appendix, the primordial supreme goddesses first manifest as a multi-armed Mahalakshmi. And out of her being, she then projects Mahakali and Mahasaraswati. And together they form this cosmic trinity that govern over the three fundamental forces of nature, or the gunas. Mahakali governs tamas. Mahalakshmi is said to rule over or govern rajas. And Mahasaraswati, ruling over sattva. And then on the other hand, belonging to an entirely different lineage is Maheshwari, who represents the sovereign power or the Shakti of Shiva, Shiva as the cosmic will. And as many of you know, she is part of the Sapta Matrikas, the seven divine mothers. And in this tradition, the seven divine mothers, we see Maheshwari is depicted as this fierce warrior goddess who emanates from Lord Shiva to assist the supreme Devi in the battle against the demonic armies. But interestingly, through the direct realization of Sri Aurobindo's own yogic sadhana, he synthesizes these two paths by taking the traditional Shakta triad and explicitly integrating Maheshwari as the first and highest of the four. And in addition, elevating the triad of cosmic powers, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati, from their traditional mythological imagery and doing away with multiple arms and physical weapons that we're used to seeing them with. And instead, he integrates them into the universal creative forces of the supermind, while completely also eliminating their historical association with the lower gunas. So let me go ahead and share a few slides that I've put together to walk through the synthesis. And the first one, again, being the synthesis of the four Mahashaktis. So we have Maheshwari, right? And here, Maheshwari is elevated from battlefield Matrika to the supreme cosmic power of wisdom, infinite vastness, calmness, and all-inclusive comprehension. And then Mahakali, redefined as pure strength, swift transformation, irresistible dynamic power, and removed her traditional association with the tamas guna. And then Mahalakshmi, here Sri Aurobindo focused on her essence of harmony and beauty, the same qualities that Vladimir just walked us through, and removed her association with the rajas guna. And then lastly, we have Mahasaraswati, where Sri Aurobindo highlighted her specialized capacity for perfection, science, flawless material execution, and patient, meticulous labor, and raising her out of the sattva guna to the ultimate force of mastering physical matter. And again, this synthesis between this group of triad goddesses and Maheshwari, right, was entirely based on Sri Aurobindo's own intensive and detailed sadhana. And long before he actually even published the booklet, The Mother, which details, as you know, in chapter 6, the 4 Mahashaktis, he was intimately experiencing and testing and stabilizing this fourfold matrix within his own body. In his private spiritual diaries, the record of yoga, which are his personal logs of this conversion, they were written mostly between 1912 and 1917, while The Mother was written a decade later, 1927. And he referred to this inner integration that he was going through during the years 1912 to 1970 as the full fourfold Devi Bhava, the integration of the 4 divine Shakti temperaments. So it is of course, no surprise that the Mother, as the supreme divine executive force, embodies all 4 Mahashaktis, is represented by the central circle of her symbol. And it was in 1907, she was just 28, that she realized for the first time this identity as the Divine Mother while studying occultism in Algeria with Max Zion and his wife Alma. Alma was an advanced clairvoyant. And many of you know the story that one day while Mira was in deep meditation, Alma walked in and saw this bright crown of 12 pearls above her head. And she also saw kind of this descent of a white light that told Alma that it was automatically dissolving any ill will that was surrounding Mira. And so it was through this direct occult vision that Alma reveals to Mira that she is the physical embodiment of the Supreme Divine Mother who has descended to fulfill an evolutionary mission on Earth. And this occult experience was later, as you see here, embedded in the design of the Mother symbol. And so whereas the central circle is the Divine Mother herself, Mahashakti, the supermind, the crown of 12 pearls that Alma saw above the Mother's head is represented by the 12 outer petals. And in time, the Mother identified each of these petals with distinct spiritual verities, in total 12, and they represent the perfected movements that are required for the purification of our outer nature. Because Sri Aurobindo defined these petals as, you can see here, vibrations necessary for the complete manifestation, we see that their geometric layout actually represents a very deliberate sequential journey. And that rather than a list of virtues randomly listed and organized, we know that they form this circular progression. It's as if a wheel of these steps that help us move through one at a time, supporting this outer transformation. But what's interesting, and what I wondered for many years, well, why are these 12 outer petals? Why do they follow a counterclockwise circular sequence? Starting with sincerity, you see here at the bottom, and then moving progressively through to peace. In fact, we were even suggested several times that it's not a counterclockwise movement, but indeed it is. It's a counterclockwise movement that, again, although it may seem intuitive, right, the Mother actually confirmed this movement when she gave instructions on how to match the colors of Sri Aurobindo had assigned to each. And she says the color, and you see here, the color light blue for sincerity and dark blue for peace, rotate counterclockwise or to the left, she said. And in the mantra Mandir, that path ascending to the top of the inner chamber mirrors that same counterclockwise direction, as do the gardens that surround the mantra Mandir. So why counterclockwise, right? Again, this is counterintuitive, but in occult geometry, this clockwise movement tracks linear material time and the downward descent of spirit into matter. So involution. But by reversing this flow to be counterclockwise, it instead represents the evolutionary climb back up to the divine source. So clockwise movement, material, linear time, the descent or involution of spirit into matter, and counterclockwise, spiritual time, and the ascent of evolution of matter into spirit. And as for the Mahashaktis represented by the 4 inner petals, the mother would later learn their specific names, powers, and personalities from Sri Aurobindo, who, as she noted, gave each one a very profound and specialized meaning. In fact, just 5 years after the mother's 1906 experience with Alma that revealed the 12 pearls, Sri Aurobindo was already independently mapping this full-forward Mahashakti force in his private diaries. And so we see in the symbol here that these 2 streams of spiritual realization, the 12 verities and the 4 Mahashaktis, converged perfectly within the mother's symbol. Sri Aurobindo's synthesis of the 4 Mahashaktis become the 4 inner petals, while the crown of the 12 pearls above the mother's head that denoted her divine status as Mahalakshmi became the 12 spiritual verities. And interestingly, while the 12 outer petals signify time and motion, right? It's a will that goes counterclockwise. The 4 central petals we can think of as signifying space and structure and stability, right? So rather than forming kind of this fluid circle, they're actually serving as an anchor, as a cross that kind of anchors the 12 outer petals. And this cross is made up of a vertical axis, right? You see here Maheshwari to the south, Mahakali to the north, and a horizontal axis, Mahalakshmi to the east and Mahasaraswati to the west. And these 2 axes converge directly at the center circle, the supramental consciousness, where the distinct emanations of the 4 Mahashaktis dissolve into a single unified divine force. So as we look at these 2 axes that apparently form like a cross-like formation, we see that what they're also doing is balancing 2 opposite forces, or apparently opposite forces, right? On the vertical axis, we have Maheshwari, Maheshwari being the south and wisdom, and we have Mahakali, the north, being strength. And so their intersection balances Maheshwari's calm vastness and wide knowledge, which is required to hold and direct Mahakali's dynamic and powerful force. And then on the horizontal axis, right, we have Mahalakshmi, connects the east, which is harmony and beauty and psychic love, and the west, Mahasaraswati, perfection, physical labor, meticulous execution. And so their intersection translates abstract divine beauty and harmony into practical, physical, perfected form. And when you look at the symbol in this way, it now starts to explain not only why the 12 petals go counterclockwise, but also when we address the Mahakalis in the 4 center pillars, we don't go in a circular form. We go Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati, because of these 2 axes that they form that intersect in the center. And so the mother symbol is more than just a symbol. It's really a cosmic blueprint. And from its core, again, the supramental consciousness out to the 4 inner petals of wisdom, strength, harmony, and perfection, and then into the 12 outer spiritual verities from sincerity to peace. It really represents the evolutionary matrix that the mother says she spent lifetimes preparing the earth to receive. In fact, if we look at the mother's birth prior to 1878, she disclosed that her work on this planet is as old as time itself. She said, since the beginning of the earth, whenever And wherever there was the possibility of manifesting a ray of the consciousness, I was there. And of course, when Sri Aurobindo was asked by a disciple what he and the mother had been doing in their formal lives, Sri Aurobindo simply replied, "We were carrying on the evolution." Sri Aurobindo mentions that for thousands of years, that the mother was the secret, he calls it golden thread running through history, that she was there in ancient Egypt, she was there in Babylon, she was there in the Renaissance. Yet across those countless ages, she descended only in portions, sending out only kind of individual, if you will, individual emanations as vibhutis to guide specific chapters of the human progress. And Sri Aurobindo verifies this when he says the mother's vibhutis would usually be feminine personalities dominated by one of the four personalities of the mother. So she would come as one of the four Mahashaktis, as a vibhuti or an emanation. But her avataric incarnation in the 20th century, we know is vastly different. In Priti Das Gupta's book, Moments Eternal, the mother declares, "I have come this time in all my aspects. This has never happened before in the history of the earth. I have never come in this totality." So this time around, she didn't send a single isolated ray. She descended with her complete, unmitigated foursome of the cosmic forces, Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati, all representing the supramental consciousness and anchoring them into the physicality of the world, obviously for the first time in history. Now, I know time is going to be a little short, so I think what I'll do is perhaps I wanted to mention, most of you or some of you may be aware of the four Purushas that are mentioned in Sri Aurobindo's record on yoga and the intense work that he did around these four Purushas. So I wanted to briefly at least mention them, given time, that these four Purushas really come from esoteric Vaishnava school that was very famous for introducing the Chaturvaya doctrine. And this doctrine was the design of fourfold emanation of the divine presence. And it dates back over, I think, 2 millennium with stone inscriptures from the 2nd century. And so here are these four Purushas, and we find them throughout Sri Aurobindo's yogic experiences being mentioned: Vasudeva or Sri Krishna, Shankashana or Balarama, Padyumnan, and Aniruddha. There is within these four Purushas another synthesis or modification, if you will, that he made. Sri Aurobindo really kind of flattened what was an inherent hierarchy found in the Chaturvaya doctrine. And he showed that these four Purushas aren't operating so much in a chain sequence, but are co-equal, interconnected dimensions of the same divine consciousness, and that they all are working in tandem to hold each other together. And this brings us really to his next synthesis, right? The second synthesis, which is really now bringing together, if you will, these mirror images of the four Purushas with the four Mahashaktis, right? The four cosmic. And we don't see visually these four Purushas in the mother symbol, but as Purushas, they are standing back, forming a strong foundation for each of the Mahashaktis. So Vasudeva, Sri Krishna with Maheshwari, Balarama with Mahakali, Pradyumna with Mahalakshmi, and Aniruddha with Mahasaraswati. And this synthesis by Sri Aurobindo, so the landscape, spiritual landscape in India was divided prior to this, right? It had two great pillars: the Vaishnava, the four Purushas, and Shaktism, the path, the divine Shakti. And operated as separate and sometimes even conflicting schools of thought. But Sri Aurobindo weaves these two paths into a dual synthesis by pairing the four Vaishnava Purushas with the four Shakta Mahashaktis and demonstrating that both are required, the Purusha and the Mahashakti. Now there is a third synthesis. In that third synthesis, again, not outwardly reflected, but inherently reflected within the four Mahashaktis, is the bringing together. Make sure that I didn't skip a slide. Okay, it's the bringing together of the Orthodox caste system with the intrinsic soul powers or swabhavas, right? So again, as you see here, he matched the Purush. First, he synthesized the four Mahashaktis, bringing together two traditions. Then he synthesized the Vaishnava and Shaktas tradition by pairing the Purusha with the equivalent Mahashakti and noticing that they had the exact same qualities, if you will, or nature, or powers, personalities, right? And now taking the Orthodox caste system and its four Varna system and seeing that behind it, the truth, which is psychological truth of these four soul powers or swabhavas that also perfectly align with the four Mahashaktis and the four Purushas. So, of course, ultimately, as individuals, our goal is to integrate all four soul powers or swabhavas within ourselves. But Sri Aurobindo mentions that the mechanics of the cosmic evolution operate on a much larger cyclical timetable. And as we know from for the universe to progress, a specific aspect of the divine incarnates as an avatar to take the lead in each yuga. And Sri Aurobindo explains this when discussing the role of the four Purushas. So here he says, going back to the four Purushas, there are four who are beyond, and they rule the mighty game of evolution. It is they who build the universe with their thoughts and imaginations. Vishnu, or Virat, put them in front, each in turn, and they govern each a cycle, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali Yuga. All the sons of immortality come forth from them and return to them. All the children of earth are their portions. One stands in front, the others incarnate to help him. They are God himself in his fourfold manifestation. And then he says, once in each Chatra Yuga, they come together. Sri Krishna, Balarama, Pradyuman, and Anuradha. Now this becomes important, which I'll explain here in a moment, but Sri Aurobindo, during his course sadhana, again, somewhere between 1912 and 1920, or throughout that period, right, he was logging how, and speaking of himself in the third person, he called himself the master of the yoga, how the master of the yoga was actively forging this fourfold Purusha presence within him on a day-to-day basis. And so he was systematically, if you will, forging his human mind, his vital, his body, to hold the combined consciousness of Sri Krishna, Balarama, Pradyuman, and Anuradha, all at once. And as he recorded in his journal regarding this fourfold integration, he says the fourfold personality of the Ishvara is now being established in the type of the divine action. Wisdom, power, love, and works are melting into each other, right? Remember, this only happens once, that all four are present. And so, as we mentioned earlier, previous avatars, right, they typically descend with only one particular cosmic emanation leading the front to achieve a specific historical task. Same as what Sri Aurobindo mentions here about the four Purushas, each at once. But to systematically shatter the Kali Yuga and transform earthly matter, we see that a new avataric president was required, the simultaneous awakening of all four Purushas within a single human being. So just as the mother stood as the physical embodiment of the four great Mahashaktis, Sri Aurobindo stood as a physical embodiment of the four Yuga Purushas. Dual avatars required to pull the world out of the Kali Yuga and transition it into the Satya Yuga. This transition, Sri Aurobindo poetically writes about in his poem, In the Moonlight. And so this was written in the early 1900s, where he openly proclaims that the structural framework of the Dark Iron Age had already concluded and that our global chaos is merely the violent, necessary clearing phase, preparing the earth for a new age of gold. So let me share that poem with you. So here, the Iron Age is ended. Only now the last fierce spasm of the dying past shall shake the nations. And when that has passed, earth washed of its ills shall raise a pharaoh brow. So here he claims that we are ending the Kali Yuga and we are moving in to the next. But it shall not be an easy transition. In fact, Sri Aurobindo is really famous for saying that it will take at least 300 years for the transition. And Mother later added, well, 300 years is the minimum, I should say, quote unquote. And he does describe these major forces that will be in play during this transition. I'll just briefly, again, because of time, mention these. But I think we're all very familiar because we're living through this time, right? That these forces that are in this transitional period, and he refers to this transitional period, again, being between the Kali Yuga and the Satya Yuga, that there's this sub-yuga, if you will, within this transition of what he refers to as the Satya Kali subunit. So we're still kind of getting the tail end of the Kali Yuga as we move into the Satya. And so what will be happening during this time? He says, the better things that are to come are preparing or growing under a veil, and the worse are prominent everywhere. In his second quote here, he says, often the change is preceded by an apparent emphasizing and raising to their extreme of things which seem the very denial, the most uncompromising opposite of the new principles and the new creation. And in terms of the chaos, it's covering these kind of faint beginnings of this transition. In the Kali age, these potentialities may act in a state of crude disorder, the anarchy of our being, which covers our confused attempt at a new order. And then lastly, the old structures that during the Kali Yuga has to collapse before we can move in to the Satya Yuga. And Sri Aurobindo in Life Divine says, at present, mankind is undergoing an evolutionary crisis in which is concealed a choice of his destiny. Man has created a system of civilization which has become too big for his limited mental capacity. And his limited mental capacity and understanding, and his still more limited spiritual and moral capacity to utilize and manage, a too dangerous servant of his blundering ego and his appetite. So I wanted here to end, if you will, with the four Mahashaktis, right? The supermental that is here to assist us in this transition. That is really Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, the two avatars that had to come in order to help this transition and bring down the supermental. And what we find in Savitri in Book 1, Canto 2, a passage which refers to all 4 characteristics, each of the Mahashaktis. And so here the canto reads, near to earth's wideness, intimate with heaven, exalted and swift, her young, large-visioned spirit, voyaging through the worlds of splendor and of calm, overflew the waves of thought to unborn things. This is Maheshwari. Ardent was her self-poised, unstumbling will, her mind a sea of white sincerity, passionate in flow, had not one turbaned wave. Mahakali. Immortal rhythms swayed in her time-born steps. Her look, her smile awoke celestial sense, even in earth stuff. And their intense delight poured a supernal beauty on men's life. Mahalakshmi. And that a wide self-giving was her native act. A magnanimity as of sea or sky, enveloped with its greatness all that came, and gave a sense as of a greatened world. Her kindly care was a sweet, temperate sun, her high passion a blue heaven's equipoise. Maha Saraswati. So with that, I would like to go ahead, let me just unscreen share here, and we can open it for, I know we're running just a little late, trying to find my, there. Let's see, am I on, I'm not on screen, am I on screen though? Yeah, we are.
No, you're still screen is.
Can you, oh really? Because it's showing me as not. Can you on screen share me then?
Let me try.
Oh, it's showing me as not. And I'm seeing all 4 of us. Are you sure?
Well, it is here still. I
Oh,
can't
really?
do it because you did it. Let me try to ask you maybe.
Because here it's asking me to share. Maybe if I share again and then unshare?
Yeah, try.
Let me try that. Okay, and then.
Or if you give me a host, I will do it for you.
Oh, over here it is. So sorry, it's on my other screen.
Okay.
Okay, there. Sorry.
There is somebody raising a hand. I think it is Chitra. Yes, Chitra, you wanted to ask your question or something? You can talk now, Chitra.
Oh, we can bring her over. Oh, there she is.
No, I'm sorry. I did not.
No?
No. Still absorbing everything that I just heard. Sorry about that. I don't know what I did.
No problem. No problem.
Your hand is up. Yes, we have few questions here and few remarks. One is from Bill. Thank you very much. I have been contemplating Lakshmi's harmony these last weeks, and it's been refreshing. Thanks again. I'm not bothered by it, but the question of how to harmonize the term guru to deity in a sentence or two is interesting. Well, in the end, no worries, let us say. All my best, and thanks for the series. Yeah, you can read yourself the views of Bill.
Yeah, and I would just, Bill just is our community member that used to live up here in Greenville that we had the opportunity to be with quite a bit. And he's just now started to rejoin. I think you're in Florida, Bill, but I just wanted to reach out and thank him. He has been donating every week that he's come to the program to support this free New Perspective program. And so we're very grateful for your donations. Thank you so much, Bill.
Right. And there is another one. Since we are in Kali Yuga, and Kalki is the presiding deity considered as the last incarnation, I was wondering if this complete manifestation of the mother is also her last incarnation. Is there any connection?
Well, I guess I will take a stab and then return it over to you, Vladimir. But it will be the last incarnation of Sri Aurobindo and the mothers as embodied as they came here as avatars. And their incarnation will now be, and Sri Aurobindo specifically mentions that he will come in his supramental form. So this will be the next incarnation of Sri Aurobindo on Earth. I don't know if you wanted to add something to that, Vladimir.
That was the question, yes, absolutely. That was the question put to the mother, whether Sri Aurobindo will come in his next. She said, no, he will not come in this old body. He will come only in the supramental body. He will be the first incarnation in the supramental body. About herself, about her, we do not know. About herself, she didn't say anything. But most probably she will come with Sri Aurobindo, yes, as Radha already showed us that there is always Ishvara behind in 4 different voices or personalities. Though these are the names used from Puranas, from later literature. If we look at the Vedic language, we will see again 4 great personalities, 4 great kings, Varuna, Mitra, Aryaman, Bhaga, and triple supermind Dakshams and Surya. So it is a bit differently presented, but these are the 4 powers of the mother. Yes, these are Adityas, her sons or her faculties. Adityas are faculties of Aditi, the Divine Mother. And they represent transcendental Satchit, Tapas, Ananda, and Vijnana. In the later language of Puranas, we have these other representatives, which Radha was presenting. This is kind of interesting that this tradition developed over time, and in Tantra they took different names for the same.
I think even in the Rig Veda, correct me if I'm wrong, Vladimir, but there is a reference, although they're not named even, we see that in the Purusha Suktam, right, that there is this kind of 1/4 that steps down and 3/4 that stay above. And so there's still this reference to 4 great Purushas. And we can even go into the Gita where there's 3, but yes, it's a tradition that has evolved over the time. And the 4 that Sri Aurobindo specifically worked with in his record of yoga and integrating these 4 have those kind of that same lineage and characteristic as you mentioned.
Right, absolutely.
I think there's a hand up. Purnima, do you want to just unmic? Let's see what they. There. Okay.
Yeah, it's not really a question, but I came upon Satpremji's book last September, and that's when I've just kept it on my table, opened a few pages every day, and it's been so enriching to the soul. I knew Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's greatness, but I did not understand the magnitude of their work. So I think the work you're doing in bringing these in more digestible formats is, I think, a huge service, and I join whenever I can. So I'm just immensely grateful for everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so there are no more questions. HP, would you like to conclude the session on Mahalakshmi?
I think all 4 Mahashaktis if we want to invoke their workings through us, we need to be developing 12 attributes. Mother calls it the foundation of the creation, which represented in the mother symbol, which is to me also useful in our material adventure in this earth. So I think Mahalakshmi is one aspect, but other three also equally are important. And also we can use it to have a self-development and self-mastery as a human being. So good, Mahalakshmi, of course, I'm stuck with the sentence that beauty and harmony is very, very important. And what Sri Aurobindo says that all problems of the world are problems of the harmony, which we see in our earthly existence everywhere, between nations, between families, within the organizations. So it's a very, very important aspect of Mahalakshmi that we need to start working with and invoking her grace to descend. Thank you all.
Thank you, HP. And I just wanted to add there, because HP mentioned all 12 verities, or 12 living principles, as we call them, are important. These 12 living principles are the foundation not only for the LaGrasse Center here in Fountain Inn, but for our university in Surat, as well as our sister organization, Sri Aurobindo Center in Surat. So these are core to everything that we do here and integrated into every program possible. And yes, HP, I totally agree. It's where we need to be focused in terms of developing and transforming our outer nature. So thank you so much for bringing that forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, next week, we're going to open with Maha Saraswati, and I think Dr. Marco Macy will be opening for us. And we've got about 3 different talks in this series. Then we will close for about 2 to 3 weeks, because we have our Sri Aurobindo Integral Yoga Retreat here in Greenville. And so during this time, we stop all of our online programs, hoping that you all can join us. And there's still plenty of time to sign up, so please do go to our website, and you'll see the speakers and the topic, and be able to register. We hope to see as many of you as possible in July. So thank you so much, and thank you, HP, for joining us.
Thank you.
Namaste.